Thing about when we crossed the sea, after we crossed the Red Sea.
Oh, Miha Mocha?
Okay, so she sang, she led the women in song. She led the women in song. And also she's called Miriam HaNeviah, Miriam the prophet. So she had gifts of prophecy. She was a singer, a dancer. Anything else anybody know about Miriam? Pnina?
She was responsible for the one of the commandments that said, do not be a false witness. In other words, gossiper. That's the first time that we hear about somebody giving us the reason to come up with this law. Do not be a false witness or do not gossip unless you have two witnesses.
Well, there's difference between gossip and false witness, which is like accusing somebody of something. She was just talking to Aaron about Moses' wife. She wasn't really, she just said his wife is a...
Apparently it wasn't just talking, because it became later on literally a law that you are
Right.
not...
Later it became gossip is considered a terrible sin.
Right.
Okay. So she got punished. She got punished for gossiping, and the punishment was a form of leprosy.
Right.
Okay. She got punished for gossiping. And also, she had to leave the camp for a week. And during that time, the Israelites waited for her. They waited for the week until she was able to come back. So they waited for her. Okay, so that's Miriam. What do you know about Aaron? What do you know about Aaron? And Susan, you just came on, Susan. So if you have anything to add about what you know about Miriam, I'm asking people what they know about Miriam and what they know about Aaron.
Well, Miriam, you're talking about what was thought of as gossip when she criticized.
Right, we mentioned that.
Right,
okay.
But actually, it's unknown whether Cushite was another woman or whether it was some other statement for an area in Moab from which Miriam Zipporah lived.
Right.
And
right.
then she was she also, the other thing she's known for being a source of water. Wherever Miriam, did you say that?
We did.
Okay, so you said all that. All right, that's what we have.
Jonathan, you're very devoted if you're listening to this while you're on a bus. So I'm very impressed.
Yes. So Aaron was involved with Aaron was Moses' older brother, 3 years or so, and he was involved in the golden calf incident. And his punishment was that he listened to Miriam criticize the Cushite women. But before that, he had a worse role in helping to build the golden calf.
Okay, any other thing about Aaron that we know? Pnina?
I'm going to go on the positive, that first of all, he was willing to go with Moses in front of Pharaoh, which is a big risk that he took for his life.
So he's a spokesman for Moses.
Yes, okay. And as an older brother, I guess they respected the fact that he was the oldest, so they gave him to be the part of the whole business with the Kohanim.
Okay, so he was the first Kohen. And
so,
what was
all this tradition of the role of the Kohen in the
right? And what was the tragedy that he had with his sons, if we remember?
Right, they were burnt in front of the altar.
The sons were burned alive,
like a foreign idol or something.
Right. So he lost.
We don't know exactly what.
He lost 2 of his 4 sons. Susan, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, Nadab and Abihu, his sons, but he also was known as a peacemaker to Moses's role as more in judgment, a leader. Aaron was a priest and a peacemaker. He tried to make peace among their people. So that was it. And he had this magical staff that blossomed when there was fighting within the camp among Korah and the others, and God said, let whoever thinks he's going to be in charge of the 12 leaders put their staffs in what was the tent of meeting, and that which blossoms will be my spokesperson or leader. and it was Aaron's staff that blossomed.
Okay, so he was a kind of a co-leader with Moses, or they shared like president. But okay, now last thing, I'm not gonna when you think about Moses, what qualities or characteristics do you associate with Moses? Because they all basically we're going to read about their deaths, their ends in this parsha. So that's why I'm asking you this. So if you were going to do a eulogy, or you were going to be honest, a eulogy would just be praise. But let's talk about Moses. What was his character? If we really analyze it, what was his character? Penina.
He got every situation that he found himself to became a source of studying and learning for him. Every step of the way, wherever encounter happened, he was strategizing or having strategies to face every opportunity. And not only that, the fact that he ran the first time and spent time in the desert also taught him how to use whatever nature gave us as form as the moon and the tide and the weather and whatever is happening in the desert and in the water, to use it in order to be successful in crossing and bringing them to a place where he thought would be safer.
Okay, thank you. Cindy.
I think he accepted the leadership and the responsibility, but I always feel like he had this why me attitude.
What do you mean?
Well, like, why am I stuck with all of this decision making and responsibility, and everybody's complaining and I'm doing my best, but I listen to God, but they're still yelling at me.
So do you think it's whiny, or he's feeling beleaguered and
Beleaguered.
beleaguered and overwhelmed?
Yes.
And sometimes even angry, you know what I mean? Fed up. I sometimes think he's fed up. On the other hand, we know that after the golden calf incident, God said to Moses, I'm going to destroy everybody and start over with your descendants because everybody's terrible. And he defended the people and said, well, it was interesting. He defended them, but his strategy, which is really a reflection on the writer of the Torah of this aspect, said, how will it look, God, if you kill these people? Because they'll say you took them out of Egypt to bring them into the desert to kill them. So you'll get a bad reputation. And that was why God in this incident changed his mind. Okay, Ben.
Thank you, Rabbi. I think this is sort of as said, but I see him as a bit of an accidental leader,
Yeah.
being abandoned at birth. I mean, that's of no choice of his at all. And then I think when God called on Moses to be this spokesperson, this leader, this man that would free the slaves, he really wasn't anxious to take the job. He didn't apply for it. I mean, I used to apply for a job to get a promotion. He was the last person, he's humble. I don't know if that's sure it's exactly the right word, but he was almost seemed to have a shyness or just not an interest in being out front and being this person
Humble.
on TV. We know other leaders that can't wait to get their picture in the press or on the front page or the TV news and such. He wasn't
And
like
actually, he had a speech defect. Also, remember, he had some kind of a speech impediment. So, he wasn't a great speaker either. He had to have Aaron. So he was very reluctant, as you say, accidental. Okay, Susan, and then Brad, and then Penina.
Well, I think that often the major characteristic cited for Moses is, as Ben Dimon said, as humility. And that's a major positive, but it's also a sense of justice. He's praised for that when he fought the Egyptians who were beating the Israelites, and other sense of justice. So I think those are his major, but he also probably wasn't a great husband or or father for that matter, because the demands of leadership was such, and his leadership was over a people that was constantly complaining and even challenging him in his leadership and challenging God. So, I think it was caught in a tight situation.
Okay, thank you. Brad.
Yeah, I see him as an evolving and a declining person. He evolved into a hero in the classical sense, a doer of deeds and a speaker of words. Speaking was really difficult for him, but he evolved and he became an eloquent speaker. So he evolved, and now we're at the point where we're beginning to see the decline.
The decline. Yeah. Okay. I think that's interesting. I agree. Panina.
I think he was a very good student.
Okay.
He loved to, he looked at what was going on around him from the beginning as he went into the crowd, and he had this amazing sense of justice. And I think this whole idea of the 10 Commandments, again, I'm going back to it. This is something that showed up, incidents that showed up during his being a leader. And every situation, he was actually learning. He was an amazing student.
Okay. Thank you.
He put it to work. I mean, when he was told to put sub-judges, whatever it is that was going on, he was aware of it. Everything that was going on, it was his sense of awareness and his sense of justice. You cannot match it.
Okay, yes, thank you. Good. Brad, did you have your hand up still? Did you want to say one more thing? No. Yes, no. Okay, I think there's one more thing that strikes me, and that I think he was lonely. I think he was a lonely man. He was at a level that and who were the only two people that he was close to? I think his brother and his sister. They were the only two people that he was really close to. I mean, not really his wife. He wasn't a good husband. He sent her back to Midian. He didn't pay attention to her. He was a lonely guy. And I don't know if you remember this, but after he came down from the 10 Commandments, they said this light was streaming from his head, and he was like, in fact, that's where Michelangelo missed the translation. Instead of horns, it was rays, R-A-Y, rays of light were streaming from him. And the same word Karen could be a horn or it could be a ray of light, and it was mistranslated, and that's why people thought that Jews had horns from that. But I don't know if you remember this. I think I've talked about it before. After that, he wore a mask all the time, except when he would talk to God, or he would reveal it to give the words of God to the people. But he lived behind this mask. And when we know, because we've been masked, you don't really know a person who's masked. They're a stranger. And so I think he was a very lonely guy. And I think that's important for what we're going to look now at the Parsha, because it might explain some of his behavior. So we're going to start now. It's Parshat Chukat. And here it is. And right away, who said this? I think it was Rebecca. So why don't you read this first couple of verses?
The entire congregation of the children of Israel arrived at the desert of Zin in the first month, and the people settled in Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The congregation had no water, so they assembled against Moses and Aaron.
Okay, let's just stop there. Okay. So this is where the Midrash is, that wherever Miriam was, there was water. And they even say it was a well that appeared everywhere she was in the desert, because Miriam died and there was no water is the very next sentence. So from that, they connect the two and say She died and the water disappeared. However, there's a big question, and a lot of commentators and think about it, and they go, when she had leprosy, they waited for her for a week. And we're going to see later when Aaron dies, the people mourn for a long time. But there's no response from the people in the text at all about how people responded to Miriam's death. So, what do you think that means about Miriam, or how the rabbis or the text is treating Miriam? Any ideas? Okay, Penina.
I think we're going back to this thing of the role of a woman in ancient times and in ancient history. And it took a while till finally women got the credit they deserve. When was it the first book that was written by a woman really published? Or any kind of recognition, especially in those days, regarding being a woman. So from all the stories, we know that it was a sub position. It wasn't always a
subordinate. Yes, subordinate position.
So I think the same thing happened here. As a woman, how many books we have? Ruth, and we have what? We don't even have
Esther.
Yeah, but I don't know if you really call it Esther. I think we'd call it more the scroll.
No, Megillah Esther. But that doesn't matter. I mean, because that was thousands of years later.
Right.
Or not hundreds of years later, I should say. So Miriam just dies, and there's a lot of questions of like why there's no grief, why there's no mourning. And also,
they are not mentioning ever the mother, Yocheved. What's happening?
They don't mention when she dies either.
And that's it.
Right. Well, when Moses, and they don't say anything about her. There have been some very interesting interpretations of why people didn't grieve. And one of them was that Miriam was a teacher of all the women and children, that she was the leader of the women and children, and that though she died, there were so many new Miriams, young Miriams that she left behind, that people did not have this terrible loss like they will for Aaron later on, because there was no one like Aaron. That also, another feminist commentator talks about how, ironically, Aaron was the priest, the legacy of the priesthood, but when the temple was destroyed, there was no more need for the priesthood. And Miriam's legacy of bringing Judaism into the home has lasted until today. That Miriam was the one who taught the mothers and daughters how to be Jews in the home. She was the educator. She was the leader of the women. And we know when there's a midrash that when the golden calf was made and everybody gave their gold, the women refused to give their jewelry to be melted down to be the idol. And that could be under the influence of Miriam. Miriam was a prophet, and it seems like her prophecy or her influence was really she didn't have a husband. There's no mention. She didn't have children. So the women and children were her family that she took care of. And so there's this idea that even though she's not mentioned a lot in the Torah, that her legacy and her power was much more influential than Aaron. Yes. Penina, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay. I want to add that every Friday night there is a prayer that we sing, Eshet Chayil Mimtza.
Right.
Who is going to find a woman of valor, a woman
Right.
of, and it's being sang and recited every Friday night at the Shabbat table. So this is a prayer also to encourage, to recognize the force of the woman of the house.
That's right.
Eshet Chayil means a woman of strength.
Right.
Eshet Chayil Mimtza, and it's a whole prayer. And in the little book that you have for Shabbat prayers, it's included.
That's right.
It needs
The
to
husband is
recognize
supposed
the place of the woman in this whole, whatever is
Right.
happening.
Okay, Brad. Yes.
Yeah, Rabbi, excuse my ignorance. Are there expressions of grief when the patriarchs die in the Torah?
Well, there is let's see, when Abraham dies, we know that Ishmael and Isaac go and bury him together, and they stand together and make peace. And we know that when Sarah died, according to the Midrash, Isaac was very sad and he was not comforted. It actually says he was comforted when he finally married Rebecca. So he was grieving, but there wasn't a people, it was a family during the patriarchal times. Now this is like a huge people. And we're going to look now very shortly and see how they responded to Aaron's death, which was completely different. And we can talk about that. So, and also, yes, when Jacob died, I think they grieved for 70 days or something. So there have been expressions of death for the patriarchs, but not Rebecca. No. And then, we know that Jacob also was very grief-stricken when Rachel died, because she was his beloved, and he built a pillar and monument to her that women still go to, religious women, and they pray at this monument. I don't know if she's really buried there, but they think she is. Rachel's pillar for children, for fertility, to be given children. They go to Rachel's pillar.
Okay.
Right? Right. So, okay. So let's continue. Okay, Rebecca, now you can read a little more.
And I'd like to add too, can't anger be a form of grief also? Because now they're going to quarrel.
Okay, that's great. That's interesting. Okay, but okay, let's read what they quarrel about. Let's go ahead.
The people quarreled with Moses, and they asked, if we only had died with the death of our brothers before the Lord, why have you brought the congregation of the Lord to this desert, so that we and our livestock should die there? Why have you taken us out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It is not a place for seeds or for fig trees, grapevines, pomegranate trees, and there is no water to drink.
These Israelites are such whiners, such kvetchers, It's like, oh my God, they're never satisfied. And that's why this whole generation had to go, basically, because they just are not, they have that slave mentality. Take care of us, take care of us. We don't know how to take care of ourselves. They have basically been infantilized almost by being told what to do for so many generations. Susan, and then Brad.
Oh, okay. So I was back to the other, to Miriam, and I think it's very abrupt that Miriam died there and was buried there. And it reminds me kind of Nadav and Abihu, that people were silent after, or at least Aaron was silent. But Miriam's association with the water goes also with her watching by the Nile and saving.
And singing by the sea.
And singing by the sea, celebrating the Red Sea. So, I mean, she has a long association with water. And then I also see people complaining, well, if the source of the water is gone, which is in the next sentence after she died there, the congregation had no water. And of course, they're going to be upset with it. And they start fetching, as you said. And then Moses gets angry.
Okay, wait, we didn't read that yet. So let's wait a second.
So,
You're right. But I think what Rebecca said was an interesting thought, which I had never had before, which is that the quarreling, and the complaining could also be an expression of grief, because your emotions are all over the place. You're like, immediately there's water going in there. Miriam is dead and we don't have any water and it's your fault. And, there could be a connection between their instant complaining and Miriam's death. So they're feeling Miriam's death on a very life or death, issue, very, very personally, as opposed to just normal grief. It's like, oh my God, without her, it's like our mother is gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sort of thing. I think, Brad, you had your hand up, even though I don't see it right now. Do you want to say something, Brad? Okay, no. All right. Panina. No, now you muted yourself.
Okay, okay. I think I shouldn't say we. I'm always falling back on was Moses looked to the people to begin with, and they literally actually chose to follow him. They could have said right away in the beginning, no, go away. But no. And I think this goes back to the fact that he was chosen to be picked out of the water because there was this belief at the time. It was called the Amuna Elis, that if the salt water meets with the non-salt water, from that area in the seas, gods were born. The gods were created. So when Moses, it was the fact that he was taken out of the water was given his name, Moshe Masha. He was kind of like, so I think the fact that they listened to him to begin with, even Pharaoh, was the fact that he was taken out of the water. So there was a godly era about him. And that's why he wasn't actually killed even by Pharaoh. He could have. The fact that the Pharaoh's daughter gave him back to his mom was like to hide him, to give him special place, special importance. And his name says it. Kimina Mayim Shitiu. I drew him out of the water. That gave him this godly forces or
okay, but that has nothing to do with this right now, even though that is.
I know that, but I'm trying to say again that this whole idea, the Miriam with the water, it's again because she's the one who drew him out of the water.
Okay, so
who watched him there, who took care of him. So that's constantly connection with this godly effort, godly image that we're giving Moses.
That's interesting. I see what you're saying. Like the God was born out of the water, the godly
exactly. So he was given the special charismatic attraction. Otherwise, why would they even follow him to begin with? They could have said with the 10 Commandments, look at the problems we got. We don't want to learn, just give us peace, blah, blah, blah. No, they still followed him.
They said that so many times. Okay, so then, why? Okay, so now, all right, Susan Ehrlich, number 6. Why don't you read?
Okay, Moses and Aaron moved away from the assembly to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they fell on their faces. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to them.
Okay, so they fell on their faces. Why? What does that mean?
They were distraught, and they also wanted probably help from God.
Right. It's like, oh my God. And yes, they fell on their faces. They went to the tent of meeting, like, tell us what to do. We're like, and let's remember that their sister just died.
Yeah.
Just died. So there's 2. She was buried. So maybe she died a day ago, because you probably buried a person the same day or the next day at the latest, as we know, because of rot, because there's no way to preserve. Okay, continue.
So the Lord spoke to Moses saying, take the staff and assemble the congregation, you and your brother Aaron, and speak to the rock in their presence so that it will give forth its water. You shall bring forth water from them from the rock and give the congregation and their livestock to drink.
So let's be very clear. What did God say?
He says, speak to the rock.
Speak to the rock. Okay. Okay, Ben, want to read?
I'd be delighted to. Number 10, correct, Rabbi?
Number 9.
Oh, number 9, thank you. Moses took the staff from before the Lord as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, now listen, you rebels, we can draw water for you. Can we draw water for you from this rock? Moses raised his hand and struck the rock with his staff twice, when an abundance of water gushed forth, and the congregation and their livestock drank. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, since you did not have faith in me to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly to the land which I've given them.
Okay.
Kind of harsh.
Oh my God. So
I mean, I like the bringing the water. That's exciting.
he
But
he hits the rock instead of speaking to it, and God says, "Okay, that's it." After everything they've been through, all the stuff Moses has done, you're not going to the land. You're not going. That's it. So, what do you think about that, Cindy? You've been unusually quiet. I need to hear from you.
Well, I think it's a little overreaction, that he kind of misinterpreted or just kind of reacted. But I'm kind of thinking of the people a lot during this. If I was in their position, where if somebody now was saying, God told me this, they'd be in a mental hospital. Now, obviously, God then micromanaged, he was more interactive. But if I was wandering around in that hot desert for 40 years with only manna to eat, and then all of a sudden there was no water, I would be complaining too.
Okay. But what do you think about the fact that Moses, or why do you think? Does anybody have a theory of why did he hit it? God said, "Speak to it," and he hit
I think it was his reaction. I mean, it would feel kind of funny talking to a rock, like, "Hey, rock, give me water." And kind of his reaction was to hit it, and it worked. They did get the water.
it was
right.
more
I think it was a very
showmanship
harsh
too.
punishment.
What'd
It
you
was
say, Ben?
more showmanship, grand, hitting it and then the water would come out. Just create more of a commotion.
Okay. Susan and then Rebecca.
So, he hit the rock before. So now he's supposed to speak to it. So the MO before was to hit it. But I had read Jonathan Sacks' interpretation of this. He was very distraught about Miriam's death. And he was in a bad place then. His beloved sister, as you said, he was closest to brother and sister, and the source of water has just died. And the people are still complaining. So, and he had done it before. So it seems like a not unexpected reaction. I think some of the things that people complain about afterwards, why he's not allowed in the land, was his arrogance or his hubris when he said, "We get the water." And then is also talking to the Israelites as rebels. And then interestingly, the people and their beasts drank, and there was some commentary about the people drinking like beasts, like animals, lapping it all up. So I think it's a troubling passage. One doesn't blame, I don't blame Moses for this. But then I'm wondering too, if Moses, as we see happen on it, is it not his time? It's time for him. He started this in his 80s, and now he's probably in his hundreds.
120. Yeah.
That's when he dies, 120 when he dies. So is he past this moment of leadership?
Okay. That's a good question. Rebecca and then Brad.
So Susan's comment follows along with my first comment about how grief can also take the form of anger. So the people are angry and Moses was angry. My two comments are, one, is the Hebrew word speak? What is that what the word is in the Torah? It says speak?
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking Moses is looking at an inanimate object, right? That's something that can't hear. So how is he supposed to speak to something that can't hear? And so he struck it instead.
God never said don't hit it.
Well, also, yeah, but also I think you're right. Like it's these people are you rebels, okay, fine, you want water, wow. You know what I mean? I think he was being human. He was being human. Okay, Brad.
I think Moses was the one person that God could count on to maintain the faith. And I wonder here if even Moses has a faith crisis. And by taking it upon himself, not believing in God, that God was going to handle it, that enraged God to the point of reacting the way that he did.
Yes, I mean, though it's still to expect to hit a rock and expect water to come out is also kind of an act of faith, because why would water come out? So you're taking a leap also. But Susan said something. I mean, first of all, you should know rabbis and commentaries have struggled with this for centuries. How could God do this? This is so unfair. Poor Moses. There's so many, and then they try to find these nitpicky reasons. Oh, like he didn't have faith, he didn't listen, he didn't trust, or he called the Jews rebels. The people acted bestial, and it's Moses' fault. I mean, all these things justify God's decision. But one second, and then, but perhaps you think about people who are still driving, and then their kids say, I have to take the keys away. I have to take the keys away. You can't drive anymore. And I'm taking them away because I love you, but I can't let you drive anymore. And I wonder if God is taking the keys away because Moses is just too worn out, too exhausted, reactive, too grief-stricken. It's enough. And is it an act? He says it in a way like a punishment, or he says, because you didn't listen to me, but maybe it's because you're not, you can't do it. You've had too many, you had a major, it's not a major accident, but I don't know how good the metaphor is but I sort of see it that way, where you have to take the keys away. Okay, Ben, Cindy, Brad, and then Penina.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very quickly, and not to be political, it reminds me of the current situation with our president.
Both candidates.
Well, I'm thinking of the one.
Yeah.
I think you can see his picture over my shoulder.
Yeah.
But is it time? And it's a tough. Everything you've done is great, but are you ready to do the next step?
I think you're right. It's like, is it time to take the keys away? And it's really hard. And Moses later on asks God to change his mind, but he says, no, this is it. And it's not just you, it's Aaron too. Aaron's going to go first. And we're going to see that. And then the entire book of Deuteronomy, this is near the end of the book of Numbers, or Bamidbar, which in Hebrew means in the desert. The end of this book, of the fourth of the 5 books, they're standing at the border about to enter, and Moses is going to just, watch from a mountaintop. But the entire book of Deuteronomy is Moses then giving his last words to the people, and you see how much he cares, and he reviews everything they've done, gives them all of this stuff, and the Shema is in the last book, and the V'ahavta is in the last book, and he reviews the 10 commandments and everything. So before Moses dies, he once again pours his heart out, like Rabbi Leader wrote this whole book about it's before I'm gone, where he tells people to write a living will and to write down everything that you want to tell your children while you're still alive, so that they'll have it. And the book of Deuteronomy could be almost considered a living will of Moses, because it's everything he wants them to remember and know. But we're not there yet. We're just at the point where, and Moses gathers himself and does that. He doesn't go off and pout or withdraw or become punitive, or, he accepts eventually, pretty soon. But right now, God's saying you're not going, and it's pretty devastating and hard to hear. Okay, Brad, did you want to say something? And then Penina. Oh, and Cindy. Yeah, Brad, or was Cindy, then Brad. Cindy.
Okay, well, I have the women's commentary. And on number 8, it says, you and your brother Aaron take the rod. So God is telling them to have the rod, assemble the community, and before their eyes, order the rock.
Okay.
So in my translation, it says order, which could
What's the
be,
Hebrew? Can you read the Hebrew?
no,
Oh, all right. What page is it? I have that book right here.
923.
Okay, I happen to have the woman's.
So if you're told to order, it could be, God says, hold the rod and order the rock, that it could be the inclination he would hit it with the rod.
I
Okay.
think an order is a verbal command. I
Right.
respectfully disagree, Cindy.
Says,
Yes, mine says order also.
okay, and it says, take the rod and before the rise, vidibartem. Yeah, that's speak. Daber, speak. So I like it. I always say this, translation is commentary. Do you know what I mean? So the way you translate is what you want people to know. But it says that take the step, and gather the community. Tava Aharon, you and Aaron, your brother, the Dibartan, and you will talk to the rock.
But God's telling him to hold the rod, so it could be an inclination to use it since God told you to hold it.
I agree. Listen, I'm on Moses' side here. I think he did, he's human, he spoke and hid, or I don't know, but it says order there, but in Hebrew it says daber, which we know is speak. Wait, one more. Brad, and then Penina. Brad, did you want to say something?
No, I lowered my hand.
Oh, you lowered. Okay, Penina.
Okay.
Now you muted yourself.
Okay, so now you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back now again to the beginning. The land was a no man's land. Abraham came, the first thing he did, he drew wells. Came the Philistine and stopped and covered all the wells. When Isaac went back, Isaac uncovered the wells. How do you cover a well? You put stones. Because there was a story also through the traveling and he's meeting the girls that he moved the stones over from the well. Okay.
Right.
So like I said in the beginning, he was an amazing student. Wherever he saw something happening, it registered with him. He knew things, otherwise he wouldn't know how to approach whatever situation that came. He was willing to learn because we know that when his father-in-law told him how to form this judicial system, he followed it. He was an amazing student of nature and of people's
so get
action.
to the point.
I think that the stone was a cover of a well, and he knew it. Because it says that came the Philistine and covered all the wells. They blocked the wells.
Okay, but let me ask you, how does hitting the well, how does hitting the stone make it move? It doesn't.
It uncovered the opening of that sprouting water. It uncovered it. It covers it.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Why would he go to a stone, to hit a stone? He could have hit a tree, could have hit a piece of, because it's taken from history that's how the Philistine blocked the wells.
Okay, so you think he used the staff to remove the stone?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, he didn't need to do that according to God.
Remember that Zipporah and her sisters.
Of course, I know what you're saying.
Uncover the well before the people came to drink from it.
Okay, so why don't you, Cindy, why don't you read? These are the waters of dispute, 13. You're muted. Cindy, you're muted.
Okay. These are the waters of dispute, where the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was sanctified through them. Moses sent messengers to Kadesh to the king of Edom. So says your brother Israel, you know of all the hardship that has befallen us. Okay, so now they've moved on. There's no more about this, but we'll get back to Aaron in a second. Yeah, we have time. So now they're on their way to the land, to Canaan, and they have to go through Edom. Edom was one of the two tribes. This tribe, actually, you say your brother Israel, because Edom, which means red, Edom, is descended from Esau. Esau had red hair, if you remember, he was hairy, but he was red.
And so your brother Israel, literally, remember Esau and Jacob. Israel is Jacob. He had two names. So they're brothers. Like you descend from one brother, we descend from Israel, aka Jacob, and you descend from Esau, his brother. Just so you know why they say your brother Israel. That's so interesting when you understand the references. Go ahead.
Our fathers went down to Egypt, and we sojourned in Egypt for a long time, and the Egyptians mistreated us and our forefathers. We cried out to the Lord, and he heard our voice. Took 500 years, though.
400.
400.
Don't exaggerate.
He sent an angel, and he took us out of Egypt, and now we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border. Please let us pass through your land. We will not pass through fields or vineyards, nor will we drink well water. We will walk along the king's road, and we will turn neither to the right nor to the left until we have passed through your territory. Edom replied to him, you shall not pass through me, lest I go out towards you with a sword.
So they said, can we just go through your country on our way to our homeland? We won't take anything from you. And they said, no. And if you come through, we'll kill you. We'll attack you. We'll attack you. Okay, so let's just finish this story. Go ahead.
Edom replied to him, you shall not pass through me, lest I go out towards you with a sword. The children of Israel said to him, we will keep to the highway. And
Can I get a barley soup?
Okay, Brad, we're hearing your food order.
Wheat bagel.
Brad, mute yourself because you're making us hungry. Go ahead.
We will keep to the highway, and if we drink your water, either I or my cattle, we will pay its price. It is really nothing. I will pass through on foot. But he said, you shall not pass through. And Edom came out toward them with a vast force and a strong hand. Edom refused to allow Israel to cross through his territory, so Israel turned away from him.
So I think it's interesting. The children of Israel said, and then it goes, we will, either I or my cattle, and you shall not. And so I think like there was a lot of people, as a group and then individually, they tried to reason with Edom, meaning the Edomites, the king, anyone, just let us walk through. We just want to go through. And it was absolutely no. So why? Why didn't they let them through? Do you have any thoughts on that? Why not? Why wouldn't they? Think about it. Why would you? Okay, so let's say that the people from San Diego said, we're walking to San Francisco. Can we walk through your city on our way through? We're talking thousands and thousands of people. Why wouldn't we, or why would we? I mean, is there any thoughts of why they wouldn't? Rebecca.
Their reputation preceded them. They had, come out of out of Egypt, and they had split the sea, and they believed in this one powerful God. I think that their reputation preceded them.
So they were what? Afraid of them?
Yeah.
You think they were afraid that they would, even though whatever they said, they didn't trust them?
Correct.
Okay. Any other thoughts of why they wouldn't let them through? Okay, Penina. You're muted.
Okay. They didn't want to share their natural resources with them. That's what they didn't want them to use the water, and that was always a problem. When Jerusalem was attacked in 1948, the first thing that the Arabs did was block the road to Jerusalem because trucks used to come up there to bring them water.
Right, and food.
They knew exactly what was the point of weakness. Without water, you can't survive. So that's exactly, we're going back to the wells and we're going back to the water. Why would the Philistine cover all the wells? Okay.
Right, okay,
to make people die of thirst.
but they said
So
they wouldn't, we
they
won't.
didn't want to share. It's in history why the lulav in Sukkot. Why are we're holding the trees that the myrtle. Why are we using the myrtle first? The myrtle was what grew on the mountains, because when the Israelites moved into the land, they couldn't settle in the valleys. They had to settle on the mountains, and the myrtle grows on the mountains. The story of Sukkot is that later on, eventually, when they went down to where they either won wars or just took a territory that wasn't civilized or occupied, they eventually, the top or the purpose of this whole trip was they arrived to live in the places where how do you call it, the tree that goes on the water, the willow? Which one is the Arava?
I think it's the willow.
The willow.
Okay,
This
yes,
is why no, what I'm trying to tell you, they weren't allowed. So they went up to live in the mountains where they wouldn't interfere with the lives of the people who lived because the water was an issue. They didn't want to share
okay, so I
their
think you're
natural
right.
resources.
They didn't want to share their resources. I also wonder, this is just my thinking, that they were worried that people would join them. They were worried that the reputation that Rebecca talked about, and also that they had this powerful God, they
Yes.
have this, they say, maybe they would leave their gods and maybe they would want to join them and make them even stronger.
Right.
So that, it's like, wow, look at these people. They've done all these things. Their God must be better than our God. And so maybe they were afraid of their influence as well, coming through their land, because it was threatening in that respect. Susan, you have your hand up.
I think that's an interesting question that I haven't totally thought about it, but I think the fear of resources, as Nina and Rebecca, but I just thought of something else. There was an article in the newspaper on tourists in Yosemite, was it, and they were leaving their toilet paper there. So I don't know if the Israelites had toilet paper.
The garbage, yeah.
Garbage, their hordes piling through, and what kind of a mess they're going to make, and disruption. So
Yeah, good point. Yes, all of it. Resources.
they're not going to have that in the Torah, that they're going to leave a mess.
But we're looking at them and they're just saying, no, we're not letting you through. So they turned around. The next time, which we're not going to read today, they actually fight because they have to get through. But here they turn around and they go another way. And now, we have to get to it. And they go to Mount Hor, and God then says, okay, Pnina, Aaron shall
be gathered to his people, for he shall not come to the land which I have given. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. For he shall not come to the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you defied my word and the waters of dispute. There we go. Take Aaron and Eleazar his son and ascend Mount Hor. 200, what is it, 60?
No, strip Aaron.
Oh, that's a number of the thing. Okay. Strip Aaron and his garments and dress Eleazar his son with them. Then Aaron shall be gathered in to his people and die there. Moses did as the Lord commanded him. They ascended Mount Hor in the presence of the entire congregation. Moses then stripped Aaron of his garments and dressed Eleazar his son in them, and Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Moses and Eleazar, Eliezer, descended from the mountain. The whole congregation saw that Aaron had expired, and the entire house of Israel wept for Aaron for 30 days.
30 days. So that's where we get Shloshim.
Right.
The first 30 days, of the mourning year. The first 7 days are Shiva, and the first 30 days are called Shloshim, which means 30. And that's also, we get it from this passage, this verse, about that you should continue to mourn to some degree for 30 days. It's not the same as sitting Shiva, but you don't listen to music, you don't go to parties, you don't celebrate any simchas in the first 30 days. You work, you go through life, but you don't have pleasure. You don't take pleasure for the first 30 days. And honestly, I remember when my mother died and we observed the Shloshim for my father too, but you didn't even want to. You couldn't listen to music. You couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear to hear anything happy at all. I only listened to the news on the radio in the car or whatever. But what is this about taking his clothes off? What do you think that's about, Cindy?
That the clothes represented the priesthood, and he wanted to pass that down to his son as a legacy.
Right. Or now you're going to be the high priest, so you have to take off these, which I guess I didn't realize. So Aaron wore these priestly vestments all the time. He must have worn them all the time because now they're taking them off. But also, as opposed to Miriam, who just died, and they buried her, here the people grieve for 30 days. But also, it seems like Moses and Eliezer were with him when he died. They were there. They held his hand. They helped him die. So it's a much more humane kind of death. And why do you think the people and we have like 1 minute, grieved so hard on Aaron? What do you think it was about Aaron? And we said some of these qualities, now we look back at the qualities of Aaron. But the thing about Aaron, wait, look here. I want to just read you what we wrote. With the golden calf, but he spoke for Moses. He was a Kohen. He had lost sons, so he had suffered like they had, and he was a peacemaker. I think Aaron was the most identifiable. I think people could relate to Aaron the most of the three of them. He was the most like them. He was soft, he was a speaker, but he was second, he was accessible. He did make the golden calf, which means they could talk to him or influence him or whatever, but it seems like Aaron was a very likable, loved, beloved person, because they don't grieve Miriam and they don't grieve Moses. He dies at the very end, and he's eulogized at the end of Deuteronomy. Never again did a prophet like Moses arise among the people of Israel who spoke face to face with God. So he's like amazing, but the people are not shattered the way they seem to be for Aaron. So I think we may underestimate Aaron sometimes, and the people certainly loved him. Susan, did you have your hand up?
The passage of stripping him of his garments is troublesome to me, because it's like I'm thinking of Dreyfus when they stripped, which is a whole different story, Alfred Dreyfus, and I just read a short bio on him. It's a humiliating experience, but you can look at it also, if they didn't use the word strip, and rather did something and transferred his garments to his son, and that could be a positive thing because his legacy lives on. It's his own flesh and blood that is going to take over. So that's a positive. So I see it as negative in the strip. You're removed from office here. You're gonna.
What's the Hebrew? I want to look at the Hebrew.
So that was equivocal to me. I've always thought of it as a humiliating.
Okay, I'm going to look, and it says,
"Look, Aaron, you're not capable anymore."
Oh, here it is.
To your
straight Moshe at Aaron at Bigdad. It's not stripped. It's undressed. Undressed.
That's a different story, because strip is a humiliating thing. But
I don't know. I'm telling you, translation is commentary. He took off his clothes, and I mean, it's also this idea of we come into the world naked. We go into, he just wrapped in a shroud, very simple shroud or whatever. But anyway, this is the story of Moses and Aaron and Miriam and their fate, and it's in this Parsha, and it's interesting to see them as real people with their flaws, with their grief. and how the people related to them. And yes, we're going to end right now, but last word, Penina.
Okay, you said the way people looked at them, and I think Aaron was more a person. They could relate to him more as a person.
Right.
With Moses, all this communication with God gave him even godly image, that he
I
himself
agree.
is more like a son of God right away. Somebody who was moved out of the water, the holy water.
Well, yeah, and he wore a mask.
This whole time he talks to God. He talks to God. You know what? That gives him godly. How would you call it?
Qualities. Yes,
Qualities.
I agree.
And it's like that's why every time he's the one who talks to God. He talks to God. That's what they expected, and I think that's the image that he continued present to him, because that's the way that he finally reached them, by them thinking that he's a son of God.
He was a spokesman. So anyway, I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom.
Okay.
And have a nice week. Stay cool.
Okay.
And
are you doing the service tonight?
I am doing the service, and I have a guest speaker, an Israeli from the north of Israel, to tell what's going on in the north.
Yeah.
And how they were told to leave their house for 72 hours, and they've been out of their homes for 275 days.
Oh, gee.
They're homeless. They're homeless,
Yeah.
basically. 80,000 Israelis homeless. We don't hear about them. So, okay. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you,
Shabbat
Rabbi.
shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
As
Bye-bye.
usual. Thank you.
Thank you so much.